How's it going, YouTube? My name is Ninja7, your resident Mistweaver Monk, and welcome into today's Restoration Druid Catweaving Mythic Plus guide. Now, Catweaving has been absolutely tearing up Mythic Plus due to its high damage and just very powerful Mythic Plus kit. But with great power comes a lot of min-maxing and a little bit of complexity. But that's what I am here to do today, is to try to simplify Catweaving as much as I can. So why is Catweaving performing so well right now? Well, the obvious answer is that they recently just buffed all of your damaging spells while in cat form to do more damage. So already that's a very easy answer. However, a lot of moving parts in the talents of Restoration Druid and in their new ability Grove Guardians has pushed them to be able to sit outside of their normal human healing form for more amounts of time. Now, the number one rule with Catweaving and doing as much damage as possible is to stay in cat form for as long as possible, because your damage, like all of your stats, don't matter a whole lot contributing to your damage, but what matters most is just spending as much time as possible in cat form and casting all those cat spells, so their new build allows them to do that. So I'm going to get one blanket statement that you'll kind of notice as a theme throughout this guide out of the way. As a Restoration Druid, and especially as a Catweaver, you're a hot or a dot playstyle, so an overtime playstyle. You do most of your healing over time and most of your damage over time. And that's one of the things that helps this playstyle out a lot, because you'll do most of your healing while you're in your druid stance, and then you'll swap to Catweaving, and a lot of that healing will still be happening. So you can do a lot of your healing between the pools. As your tank runs up and grabs all the pack, you can apply all of your hots so that while you're actually in combat with that pack, you can just do a ton of damage. And one general rule that you'll want to follow is that you don't want to wait until your health bar looks low to heal someone. So you don't want to let them take big damage and then heal them. As a Restoration Druid, you want to apply your hots before they start taking damage. That way, when they do take that damage, they already have all of those hots healing into them, filling up that missing health pool. Unlike your traditional, say, Holy Priest, for example, who would cast Flash Heal into a health bar that looks like this. And once again, casting all of these heal spells or applying all of these hots to your allies before the damage comes in will allow you to be damaging as the damage happens. Now, for starters, I want to talk about the stats. So as always, you just want to prioritize your item level first. As you see here, I am still gearing this character out. My item level is low. But once you get to the point where you can start picking and choosing secondary stats, you want to focus on haste the most. Now, I will warn you, one thing that a lot of people don't like about this build is that you're swapping between forms, refreshing dots, refreshing hots, left and right. So there's a lot of button presses. So if you're a very casual player and want to look to cut down the complexity of this build, just cut down on your haste. I promise you guys, it's not the end of the world, but just know that haste is your number one priority with this build. After haste, it's kind of up to you what you want to go for. So number one, your mastery gives you a lot of healing. It'll make your nourishes, the nourishes that you'll see that these Grove Guardians cast, heal for a big chunk, heal for a lot more. And it'll allow you to stay in cat form for a longer time. However, versatility not only makes you tankier, but adds a ton of damage to yourself, along with crit, which adds a ton of damage and really works well with cat stance. So if you find yourself needing more healing, it's very safe to go for mastery. It gives a lot of healing value, but the safe option is just pumping haste and then versatility. You cannot go wrong going with versatility second. And then as for talents, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because I'll kind of bring up some synergies as the video goes on, but I'll have this build along with a beginner build down in the comments below. But for the most part, the very important things is noticing how you're going to be putting a lot of points into things like Life Bloom, Wild Growth, and Efflorescence, because these are going to be our primary hots that are going to do most of our healing. We also cannot live without Grove Guardians. These guys are what make this entire build possible. They do the most healing so that we can stay in cat form while they sit there and heal. And then outside of that, we're basically just doing a bunch of Catweaving stuff. So you'll notice here on the tree, on the Druid tree, we take all of our Catweaving spells, Improved Swipe. We take Skull Bash, which is going to be our interrupt that we can use while in cat form. which is primarily where you're going to use it, or if you're in a pinch caught in bear form, you can press it while in bear form. You also have an AoE stop. It's a disorient called Incapacitating Roar that you can use. But for the most part, this tree just adds a lot of survivability to us with things like improved bark skin, frenzied regen, which if you're about to take a big slam of damage, you can swap to bear form. Press this, it's a very powerful hot that you can only use while you're in bear form, and it'll add so much survivability, especially when coupled with Urson Vigor, which when you swap to bear form, you just gain big, beefy stats. But yeah, just to put it simply, this talent tree just adds a ton of damage. We're gaining cat form crit rate with this talent. We're gaining AoE Sunfire, just an AoE dot with improved Sunfire, and then we're just picking up all of our cat stance abilities on the way. And like I mentioned, I will be leaving this build down in the comments as well. This is a starter build. It's not much different, and it's not as optimal. We are sacrificing a lot of very important builds. But if you're someone who likes to learn less buttons at a time, you want to learn the core first and then pick up 1 or 2 buttons as you do dungeons, then this build is a great way to start off. I've removed Cenarian Ward, which is a great hot that we'll get into in the healing section. That way it's just one less thing to worry about. And I've also removed a very big part of this build called Adaptive Swarm. But once again, it's just to limit the amount of buttons that you're having to get used to at a time, and you can work your way toward that more advanced build that's more powerful. And I've basically just replaced them with passive talents that also kind of work with this build, like Budding Leaves. And then same on this tree. I've taken out the Ursine Vigor and Frenzied Regen buttons, the swapping to bear stance when you're about to take big damage buttons, in favor of adding a passive survivability option in Well-Owned Instincts. But once again, the more powerful build is that first one, and I'll leave them both, and you can start with this one and work your way toward that other one if you prefer. So I'm going to split this video up into 2 main sections. One is how to do your damage rotation, and then one is how to do your healing rotation, just to do the healing. And then I'll combine them into a more complete rotation. So I'm going to start off with your damage. Now your damage is kind of subcategorized into your druid form damaging spells and your cat form damaging spells. But luckily, it's not that difficult. There are only 2 damaging spells that you have to worry about in your druid form. So your Moonfire and your Sunfire. Now, like I said before, you're going to want to minimize the amount of time that you're spending in the stance. So instead of like the traditional Restoration Druid way of applying your dots, by applying Moonfire to every target before you swap in a cat stance or before you start healing, that's not what you're going to be doing. What you want to do coming up to a pool while you're applying those hots is you want to identify the primary target or the primary targets. So in this case, for these training dummies, I've marked the square is going to be our primary target. Say that we pull a pack of 5 and there's one enemy that has so much more health or is just the one that does the most damage, then this is our primary target. But then we're also going to treat X as if they were the other, mini boss in the pack, or just the second highest health enemy in the pack. So what you want to do is you want to apply Moonfire to that primary target, the one individual primary target, and then if there is a secondary target, you also want to apply Moonfire to them. Easy enough, right? You don't have to apply it to everyone, just your 2 or your 1 main targets. And then after that, no matter the pack size, if you're just on single target or you're pulling all 5 targets, you still want to apply Sunfire. Now with this build, as you see, Sunfire will hit AoE, so it will give great AoE damage, but it also just melts health bars. It does a lot more damage than some of even your Catweaving dots will do. So that's why these 2 dots are very important while you weave into your Druid stance, because they both do a ton of damage. So after you've gotten both of these dots applied, we're just going to do a single target scenario for this instance. We have both of these dots applied. Now it's time to go into Cat Stance. Now Cat Stance is a little different because you have 2 types of spells. You have your generators, ones that generate these things combo points, and then you have your spenders, ones that spend these combo points. So for the most part, you're going to want to build up to 5 combo points and then do a spender. Now, luckily with this build, I've only included 2 spenders instead of including the other third one. We're just including the 2 big damage dealing ones, which are Rip and Ferocious Bite. Now, Ferocious Bite is the easiest one. It just slams a big chunk of damage, and it does more damage per combo point. But Rip is a bleed, or another dot, a damage over time effect, that does a ton of damage. It will melt health bars, and its damage also increases per combo point that you spend on it. Now, a good rule of thumb is just to get into the habit of only pressing these two spells while you're at 5 combo points, but you never want to sit at 5 combo points and cast combo point generating spells. If that's the case, if you're just going to sit at 5 while casting your combo point generators, then you might as well just spend those 5 and then start recouping those 5 that you just spent. Now, what are our combo point generators? Well, we have 4 of them, but they're also pretty simple to understand. So we have 2 single target ones and 2 AoE ones. Our first one is Shred. Now, Shred, just like Ferocious Bite, is a single target, just one-off smack of damage, and it generates 1 combo point. However, if it crits, it'll generate 2. So it looks like this. You see there it crits, so we got 2 combo points. Our other single target combo point generator is Rake. Now, this is a dot or a bleed, so it's a damage over time effect, but it also generates 1 combo point. You see there, 1 combo point. Now, our AoE combo point generators are similar. We have Swipe, which is just like Ferocious Bite, just like Shred. It's just a one-off AoE smack of damage, and it generates 1 combo point. And Swipe looks like this. See, you swipe, and it's just an AoE swipe of damage. Now, our other AoE spell or AoE combo point generator is Thrash. Just like Rake and Rip, this is an AoE bleed. So Thrash looks like this. It also generates 1 combo point. Now, on low target count pools, like 1, 2, or 3 mobs, you'll just stick to your single target one. So you'll rake the primary target to apply the dot, and then you'll just start shredding because it just does the most damage. However, about 4 or more targets, you get more damage out of swiping than pressing Shred. Now, no matter the target size, there will always be a primary target that you're going to be focusing, so you'll still apply Rake to that target. Even in like 5, 10, 20 man scenarios, you still want that Rake rolling on your primary target. But Thrash is a little weird. Thrash does so low damage. It is such a weak bleed. It does about half of what a Sunfire does. So you'll only really press Thrash once you're at like big AoE mobs, or if you just want to stack another dot in like a single target scenario, it's fine to press. But just know that Thrash does very low damage compared to your other dots. So with all of that explanation out of the way, our priority list in Cat Stance is number 1, if you're at 5 combo points, you want to spend those 5 combo points. Now, this is where it can get kind of complicated. Should I spend on Rip the bleed, or should I spend on Ferocious Bite to do a big slam of damage? Well, you basically have to ask yourself in that moment, am I going to get enough value out of that Rip? Meaning, is this enemy going to stay alive long enough for this bleed damage to get more value than if I just press Ferocious Bite? So the general rule of thumb is if you expect this enemy to stay alive for like 6 seconds or more, then just go ahead and press Rip on it to apply that bleed. If not, you'll just get more value out of Ferocious Bite. Also, if you already have a Rip on the enemy and you're at 5 combo points and you don't need to refresh that dot, it's okay to Ferocious Bite and then just build back up to refresh that Rip before it falls off. You see here, I only missed like half a second of that Rip downtime, and we were able to squeeze in a free Ferocious Bite, basically a free Ferocious Bite, just by not applying Rip back to back on this enemy. Now, as you see there, 1 Rip duration lasts about the same amount of time of you casting 3 different spenders. So what you can do is you can Rip the primary target, and then you can swap to the secondary target and build up to another Rip on this target and have enough time to swap back to the main target before that Rip falls off. So you can juggle about 2 enemies having Rip on both of those guys. But once again, that's rarely worth it for a long amount of time on a pool, because by the time you've applied Rip to 2 targets, they're likely gonna be like dying. So you'll probably apply Rip to 2 targets and then maybe come back to the primary target if they have enough health and apply a 3rd Rip or refresh that Rip on that guy. But for the most part, you'll just apply Rip to both guys and then start Ferocious Biting until the pack dies. And then if you're not sitting at 5 combo points, you want to prioritize generating those combo points. So ideally, you want to have Rake on your primary target as your next highest priority. You always want this dot rolling because it can do a lot of damage over time. And then after that, you have to ask yourself, am I in an AoE scenario? Will Swipe do more damage? Or am I in a single target scenario? Will Shred do more damage? And then you just basically do that same rotation until you hit 5 combo points. Now, where this build gets very complicated is also keeping your Moonfire and Sunfire refreshed. So let me go ahead and show you what it looks like juggling our 4 primary dots on this single target enemy. So we're going to rip them, rake them, and then swap to Druid stance, cast our 2 Sunfire and Moonfire, swap back to Cat stance, we can get a Ferocious Bite off, and then we basically just refresh dots from here. So our Rake's about to fall off. We can go ahead and, since we're in downtime, apply a Thrash. Then we just shred until we get 5 combo points. And we refresh our Rip. And then we swap back to Druid stance, hopefully before these dots fall off, but I did not get it in time. And apply both of our fire dots. And then right there, we just keep that cycle flowing. And you see there, we do a ton of damage. And then I want to introduce you to our next dot. This is our final dot that we're going to be going over, and that is Adaptive Swarm. Now, how Adaptive Swarm works is it is a very small dot itself, but it amplifies the damage that our other dots are going to be doing on that target, which leads to, I'm sure you can imagine, a ton of damage. So now I'm going to just add that into our rotation. So I'm going to be in Druid stance, say that we're coming up to this pool. I apply both my fires, then I swap to Cat stance, I rake, and I rip, and then I'm going to Adaptive Swarm, and then I'm going to Thrash and just watch all those single target dots ticking, and it just leads to so much damage. Then we can start refreshing these dots right before they fall off. And yeah, as you can see, all that this playstyle requires is that you refresh all of your dots, and you'll be doing insane amounts of damage. And that's as simple as our damage rotation can get. However, as we bridge the gap between our damage rotation and our healing rotation, I want to talk about one of our major cooldowns. And I'm sure you guys are used to it, but it's Convoke the Spirits. Now, Convoke basically just makes you do a big flurry of spells depending on what stance you're in. But that is really cool because it's an adaptive spell. You can use it as a healing cooldown and cast a bunch of healing spells if you're in your Druid stance. Or if you don't necessarily need this as a healing spell, which a lot of times you won't, you can cash it in as a damage spell. Now, it's important to understand what spells are possible. So if you look at this tooltip down in the bottom of the screen, you'll notice that you can cast Ferocious Bite. That's your big one. Hopefully you get a lot of those. Shred, Moonfire, Wrath, Regrowth, Rejuvenation, Rake, and Thrash. Now notice that the only AoE spell here is Thrash. The rest of those damaging spells, even Wrath included, are all single target. So I'm sure you guys can imagine that the best way to get the most value out of this spell is for it to be used in 1 or 2, I guess 2's fine, target scenarios. It doesn't get that great of value in big AoE pools. Its best, most maximized value is on single targets, so that makes it a great option to just burst a bunch of damage on a boss. Now, once again, it is a bit RNG because you hope to get a lot of Ferocious Bites, a lot of shreds, hopefully reapply your Rake and Moonfire so you don't have to swap out of Cat stance. But this is what it's going to look like. So let me reapply all of my dots while in Cat form. And then I'm going to go and cast Convoke. Now, also, every Shred and Rake and Thrash that we do will generate us a combo point. So you see there, I pressed Convoke and I got 4 combo points, but I did a ton of damage. So it's really good right after you use one of your spenders and you're sitting at 0 combo points to press Convoke, and you'll just get massive damage and recoup some of those combo points that you just spent. And then also, I want to talk about some of the spells that you can get while in Druid stance. So if you look once again down in the bottom right, you can see it can cast Wild Growth, Swift Mend, Moonfire, Wrath, Regrowth, Rejuve, Rake, and Thrash. So it can either cast a lot of hots, it can even get a couple of damaging spells, so it's nice because you're going to be standing in melee most of the time, weaving in and out of Cat form, so you can still get Rakes even if you do this for healing. But one very important thing to note is that this can cast Regrowths. Now there's one very powerful combo that actually makes casting Convoke in Druid stance worth it. And that is combining it with one of your other many very small cooldowns called Nature Swiftness. Now on the surface, Nature Swiftness is not a very sexy spell. All it does is grants one of these three abilities: Rebirth, which is your combat res or your battle res, Entangling Roots, which you very rarely will never use the spell on that, or it makes your next regrowth instant, free, and very importantly, castable in all forms, including cat form. So on the surface, what you can do is you can cast Nature Swiftness and then get an instant regrowth for an instant pop of healing, and that's how the spell was designed. However, it's kind of coded a bit weird, where if I buff myself with Nature Swiftness, so now my next regrowth will get boosted, and then I cast Convoke, any regrowths that happen during this Convoke are going to be boosted by that Nature Swiftness. And you'll notice here I still have this buff, so I can just press regrowth and it'll cast instantly and still be buffed by Nature Swiftness. So if you combine these two spells, you'll get a lot of healing if you get regrowths cast during your Convoke. But now we're going to fully transition into the healing portion of this video. So once again, you have a lot of very powerful hots, and then you have some very weak ones. But since we're going to be spending as much time outside of Druid stance and in cat form stance as possible, we've actually simplified this build so that you don't have to apply as many hots as you can. You don't have to apply as many hots to one person as possible. You'll just need to apply like 1 or 2 hots, then you'll be free to swap to cat form and do a bunch of damage and healing. Now your number one priority is going to be your Life Bloom. This hot heals for a ton. The hot itself does do a lot of healing, but what's very special about this hot is that if you reapply it right before it falls off, or if you let it fall off, then it'll do a pop of healing. So it does a hot, and then at the end of the hot, it does like a small burst of healing, which works very well with it being one of the hots that we're going to be applying as we come up to a pool. Because as your tank starts pulling that pack, if they have this hot on them, they're going to be taking little smacks of damage, which will be healed up by the hot. And then if any big damage starts to overcome that small hot, then that big burst will help fill their health bar entirely. But because of the talents that we take, we can actually apply 2 of these. And then since we have photosynthesis, if we apply it to ourself, if we choose ourself as one of those 2 targets, then all of our hots will heal 20% faster. So ideally, you don't want to apply this to yourself coming up to a pack. You want to put it on the tank and then maybe on one of your melee DPS or your ranged DPS that you know is taking the most damage or is the most squishy. And then if you know that a big damage instance is about to happen, like a big boss mechanic, or if you're on a big pack that has a big damage window, then you can reapply one of the 2 Life Blooms to yourself. That way all of your hots start ticking a lot faster and you'll do a lot more healing. Another added benefit that adds a lot of power to this spell is that it has a hidden mechanic called clear casting. So every time that this hot ticks, it gives you a chance to get this buff called clear casting. All it says is that your next regrowth is free. Now, what's very important about that is normally it just saves you a bit of mana, but this actually works with our tier set. So our tier set just says that clear casting now causes your regrowth to also cast a Nourish, which is a massive spot heal, onto an injured ally at 200% effectiveness. So now by just maintaining your most powerful hot, you're just activating your tier set and getting a lot of spot healing out of one global cooldown. One regrowth will spot heal the mess out of your team. But that is your number one hot priority. Now your next most important hot is not really a hot. It's a ground circle that you're going to be putting down called Efflorescence. Now this is very important because it has a long duration. It'll sit there and heal allies inside of it for a really long time. It can last an entire pool or almost most entire pools. And very importantly, it does not aggro any enemies inside of it. So as you're running up to a pack, you can apply it to where you're going to be attacking that pack and then apply your 2 Life Blooms and then go ahead and swap into cat form and start doing damage. And what's really cool is since these are our 2 basically most powerful hots that we can apply before pools, they even have some synergy. Since we're taking Verdancy, every time that one of those 2 Life Blooms blooms, it's going to heal people that are being healed by your Efflorescence by a big chunk heal. So once again, this is just more big passive healing that comes at little cost between pools of just applying your biggest hot and having your biggest circle heal on the ground. And then next up is going to be Cenarian Ward. Now this is a kind of a weird hot, but it's a very powerful single target hot. Now how it works is you basically apply a bubble to someone. You put this on someone, they have a bubble on them. The next time that they take damage, that bubble is going to pop and then the hot's going to start rolling. So it's kind of like a smart heal in that way where it'll only heal them once they start needing healing, but it's excellent to also apply to your tank. So if you have enough time to apply this to your tank as they're running up to a pool, it will just provide even more safety to that tank and apply a lot of value. Outside of that, you only really apply this to your DPS or yourself once they get selected for a mechanic, since you know they're going to be taking damage and needing healing. But this is just an excellent way to add effective health to your tank's health bar. And then finally, our AoE hot is Wild Growth. This is a staple for druids. I feel like it always has been, but it's going to heal up to 5 injured allies. But the hot starts off ticking more at the beginning, and then it starts to taper off and heal less as it sits on your allies. Which is great because you don't have to pre-apply this hot like you do the other ones. You can basically wait for damage. If you know a big slam's about to hit, swap to druid form and just cast this as soon as that damage hits. That way it starts off strong and heals on top of your other hots, and you get the most value out of this. But this is not a cast on cooldown type spell like it used to be. This is just our AoE heal spell. And then I guess lastly, you still have Rejuve, but as I've said before, we are not taking any talents that really buff Rejuve, and since we're spending as little time as possible in cat form, we just don't have enough time to add this to our priority list. However, if you know massive damage is about to come out, I guess you can try to coat as many people as you want to, or as you can fit in with Rejuve. Just know that this is limiting your min-maxing. The more time you spend casting Rejuves, the more time you could be doing other things that will likely get a lot more value. But there will be scenarios where you just need to sacrifice some damage and get a little bit more healing, and that's totally fine. And finally, I've mentioned it a couple of times, but we have Regrowth. Now, this is our spot heal, and it applies a very tiny hot at the end of its heal. And for the most part, newer druid players are going to be spamming this left and right, but you really don't want to get in the habit of this. If you really do a good job of maintaining your hots, you won't have to press Regrowth almost ever. However, our tier set does really synergize with it and adds a lot of power to it when you're able to clear cast it. So once you have that clear casting buff, you will be able to cast this Regrowth and get big spot healing. So that's basically when you'll use this. Or, like I said earlier, you can press Nature's Swiftness while in cat form doing damage and get an instant free regrowth while still in cat form, not having to swap out of druid form. And that way you can get that big spot heal while in cat form and keep doing that damage, keep that cat form rolling. Another very important healing cooldown that you have at your disposal is Flourish. Now, once again, I've already said that you're not going to be in druid stance a lot. However, this is a 1-minute cooldown that allows you to do a lot of healing while you're in druid stance. Basically, it just increases the duration and increases the effectiveness of any hots that you have out. So ideally, you're going to be sitting in druid stance, summoning your Grove Guardians a lot. And then once that big damage comes out, you're going to swap to druid stance and cast a Wild Growth. And then you can press Flourish and it'll enhance that Wild Growth, but then also any other hots that you may have already at that time. So the most ideal scenario is that you have your 2 life blooms going, you have just casted your free enhanced regrowth, and then you cast Wild Growth and you flourish it and get all that enhanced boosted healing. But for the most part, it's totally fine if you just want to Wild Growth to deal with moderate damage, Flourish to enhance that Wild Growth, and then get back into the Catweaving action, letting the Grove Guardians clean up the rest of the healing that need to be done. And finally, your big safety net spot heal is Swiftmend. This basically just consumes a hot on one ally and will do a big smack heal. Now, it's very important that you have to have a hot on someone. So if I press this on myself, it says I cannot do that yet. But once I apply a hot, then I can Swiftmend them. So ideally, you'll always have a hot rolling on someone. If not, you can cast. You can use your Nature's Swiftness regrowth and then Swiftman that hot off, and you won't be losing much because that hot kind of sucks in the first place. And that'll give a big smack of spot healing in an instant. And then I haven't really talked about many cooldowns. I've talked about Convoke, but that's not really a healer cooldown. We most of the time are going to be using that in cat form. So how does this build get the healing job done? Well, it's all made possible by these little dudes, the Grove Guardians. So these are little treants that you summon, and they just start dancing around. When you summon them, they're just going to be spot healing people with nourishes. Now, it's important to know that these nourishes are going to be more powerful based on the amount of hots that are on that ally, but for the most part, we just summon them and they'll be spot healing the group left and right. And what's really good is who we summon them on, or who we are hovering over when we summon them, that will cast a Swiftman on them. So right once you press this button, you're getting an immediate spot heal on whoever you press it on. But since we're taking this talent here, Wild Synthesis, they're also going to cast a Wild Growth right once they spawn. So as soon as you spawn one of these guys, he's going to spot heal someone, and he's going to do an AoE Wild Growth. And then for a long duration, he's just going to be spot healing left and right whoever needs it. And the great part is you can just press one of these guys and get good value out of that to do good maintenance healing for the next few seconds. Or if you see here, we have up to 3 charges of these guys. So in big damage scenarios, stacking these guys on top of each other is going to be your major healing cooldown. Since you'll notice here, we are not taking the primary Druid ability Tranquility. We just don't have enough time to press that button. But now we're going to be stacking as many treants as we can on top of each other to combat incoming damage. So what that will look like is we just press the button 3 times and boom, all 3 of these guys are out. They're partying. We're staying alive. Look at these guys dancing. It's a dance floor. This button is so powerful. And what makes it even stronger and works super well, and what kind of makes cat weaving as powerful as it is that you can summon these guys in cat form. So I'm in cat form, I'm doing my damage stance, and without even sacrificing a global cooldown, if I press like swipe here, I can press Grove Guardians in the same global cooldown, be doing big damage, and some of these guys do big healing. So watch this. Swipe, summon Grove Guardians. Boom, same global cooldown. These guys are off the global cooldown. I did not have to swap out of Druids or out of cat stance. So I can just sit here, do my damage rotation, and staying in cat stance for the most part, and then yeah, get as much healing as I need to with these guys. Let them do all the healing. You can use your Nature's Swiftness while in cat stance to do a regrowth and not take you out of cat stance. You can summon Grove Guardians. You'll have a lot of hots rolling. As long as you maintain your 2 life blooms and your efflorescence, you'll have excellent healing coming out at all times while doing big damage in cat stance. And that is the basics of cat weaving. So just one more time, I'll kind of show you what it all will look like from pool to pool. So as you see here, we're going to be pretending like our tank is running up to this pack. We're going to apply our life blooms to 2 people. I'm applying it to myself and a training dummy. I'm going to efflorescence, and then I'm going to use my 2 Druid form dots and then swap to cat form, apply all of my dots, and then just maintain those dots. And it's really that simple. And you'll see here we're doing big damage. We can even convoke this guy, do massive damage while also doing massive healing. Once our dots are about to fall off, we can reapply them and then reapply our hots while we're in Druid stance, reapplying those Moonfire and Sunfire, and then swap back to cat form, refresh that rip, and it's just a rinse and repeat, all while filling all the healing or most of the healing with Grove Guardians. Trust me on this, these guys are insane and can do a lot more healing than you probably think. Well guys, my name is ElbenNinja7, and that has been my Cat Weaving Mythic Plus guide for 10.2 and 10.2.5 since it's coming up pretty soon. As always, if you have any questions or if you think that I left something very important out, feel free to leave that down in the comments. And if you're looking for even more information, look down there because guys are going to be leaving some pretty good information in the comments. You guys always do. You come in clutch. And if you want to support me and support my channel so that I can keep doing YouTube full time, check out the Patreon. That link is down in the description below. And a special thank you to those who are on the screen right now who have chosen to support it in the past. But while you're down there, make sure you guys like the video, make sure you're subscribed, and once again, comment whatever you feel like commenting. Trick the algorithm, you guys know how it goes. But guys, I'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care.